The respective killers of two baby boys have been sentenced today. The parents of 10-month-old Finlay Bowden, Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden were both given a life sentence for brutally murdering their baby son. And Jake Drummond has been jailed for life with a minimum of 32 years for murdering 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jacob's mother, Louise Lennon, was handed 10 years after being found guilty of neglect and allowing the death of a child. Whenever cases like this arise, the question of the death penalty always also arises with it, doesn't it? Whether or not the death penalty for child killers is something that should be brought back. And I thought, let's discuss it. So I'm joined by the barrister Chris Daw and GB News' very own presenter Michelle Dewberry. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Chris, I'll start with you. Do you think we should have the death penalty for child killers?
No, we shouldn't have the death penalty for anyone. It's something that's a relic from 3,000 years ago and even longer. I think the real question is, how do we learn from these tragedies to stop them happening again? And I can guarantee you from 30 years of experience of criminal law that bringing in the death penalty for the killers will not stop further killings in the future, because it never has and it never does.
Michelle, I'll bring you in now on that then.
Yeah, I completely disagree. I absolutely think it's time to at least certainly review this. I would probably put it out to a referendum, quite frankly. This whole notion that you would apply kind of capital punishment, the death penalty, to somebody as a deterrent to somebody else doesn't really wash with me. I would apply the death penalty for the simple fact that actually, if you have it in you to torture, grossly abuse these children, sometimes, by the way, your own child, for a mother, particularly, to be able to give birth to a child and to treat their child like that, for me, there is zero even chance of redemption. You cannot come back. You cannot rehabilitate a person like that. So in the cases where it is beyond any reasonable doubt, where you've got conclusive evidence backed up by whatever means necessary, DNA, whatever it is, then in those cases where absolutely, categorically, you are guilty, you have tortured and murdered your child, then why on earth would we not consider the death penalty?
One of the big arguments against the death penalty, Chris, of course, is miscarriages of justice. In absolutely nailed-on cases, then that wouldn't be the case. I suppose that's out the window. I suppose, as Michelle was alluding to there as well, there's no rehabilitation, in my view, with these people. Why would we even want to try? Why would we want to have the financial burden of whatever it costs every single year to keep these monsters in prison? Is it not just better to execute them?
No, I mean, I don't know if Michelle knows anything about these people at all in making these judgments. I wonder, Michelle, would you apply that to someone with severe mental illness? Would you apply it to someone with an IQ of 70? Literally anyone that killed a child?
Well,
Where's your limit?
I've got to be honest. I find it quite interesting that your first go-to point is in terms of mental health issues and all the rest of it, because in the case we just heard today, you'll be, of course, familiar with the fact that they want things like their age to be considered as a mitigating circumstance. The fact that this lady today that we heard, is she about 20? Well, I'm sorry, but you know that torturing your own child is wrong from the I would say, from the day you give birth. And if you don't, there is something wrong with you, quite frankly.
Are you going to execute people with severe psychosis, with mental health problems, with severe learning difficulties? Are you going to execute them, Michelle, rather than just blabbing on about punishment and revenge?
Hang on, Patrick. So to answer you directly, you've asked me a direct question. If someone's got, I don't know, postpartum psychosis or something like that, which is provable, demonstrable, and that is why they have acted that way, then no, of course not. Why would I do that?
Not any other form of illness, but such as severe, chronic, long-term drug addiction, which is not someone's fault, as I'm sure you think it is.
But that's an interesting point, because that played a key role in at least one of these horrific incidents that we're talking about today, which was
questions around that. Why are people addicted to drugs? Why are people in this situation? Because we have a ludicrous law on the misuse of drugs, which we've had for 50 years, and that's responsible for every one of these cases.
OK, Chris, could I just ask you on this? Because I know that in your capacity, obviously, as a barrister, you are skilled at making arguments, and I do think that there's quite a bit of deflection taking place here, which is that I don't want to get dragged into the notion of whether or not we should legalise drug use. I'm going to hit you back with a question now, Chris.
Feeling.
Why do you care more about the rehabilitation of drug addicts than you do about dead kids and getting justice for them?
That's nonsense.
So
what I care about is reducing the number of kids who get murdered. And you don't do that with the death penalty. Go to America, see how many people they execute, and see how many children are murdered. It's a hell of a lot more than we have here.
So can I progress your thought process then? So what you're telling me is if there is a situation where somebody is not in control of their faculties, whether it is a mental health issue, an addiction problem, or whatever the excuse, and we can agree to disagree on those excuses, but by your logic then, hold on, let me ask you the question, please, I haven't finished yet. By your logic, if someone is in control of their thoughts and then they torture and kill their child, would you be in favour of the death penalty then?
Absolutely not, because the death penalty fundamentally increases the amount of crime and violence in the societies that practice it. Any society that has the death penalty has higher levels of violence and higher levels of murder. I don't know if you've ever researched any of this, Michelle, if you know anything about criminal justice.
I think maybe, Chris, there is also a moral point, though, here, isn't there?
But why are we going down, why are we looking at this, about the impact of the death penalty on an individual on other crimes? I'm not talking about that. I'm not coming from this from a perspective of deterring someone else acting in this horrendous way. What I'm talking about in isolation is the death penalty as a consequence, as a punishment to that single individual. You're extrapolating it up and looking at it as a consequence on the impacts of other people. I'm not talking about that.
So your position is vengeance is the most important thing, even if that vengeance causes more crime and more deaths.
I don't regard the death penalty as vengeance. I see it as a form of punishment. I don't see the death penalty as a vengeance. I see it as a form of punishment. I found it quite a cost-effective punishment, actually. And by the way, you could even throw this out to the relatives of the victim and let the relatives of that victim to decide. Do they think that would be inappropriate?
And let everybody in the village throw fruit at people that commit crimes. That's a good idea. Rather than just having a balanced, fair justice system that allows independent judges to look at all the facts, apply the evidence to decide the best sentence, let's have an opinion poll on the death penalty.
But
wonderful. That's a really wise system and fair system of justice in any society.
Firstly, I think you've been a bit silly. I'm not talking about people chucking strawberries in the local town centre. Firstly, I would actually be in favour. I would be in favour of having a referendum about introducing capital punishment as a potential sentencing option. Yes.
Go on, Chris. It's amoral to kill people. Killing people is utterly amoral. And the society paying people to murder on its behalf is about as amoral as it gets, because there's no excuse for grown-up, civilised individuals. There are excuses and explanations for some people, but not if a society chooses to become a murderer as a society.
But then I and many people don't share your moral compass. I don't think it is abhorrent morally to terminate the life of an adult who has tortured a child. I don't.
And so, Chris, quite clearly, you don't think there are any circumstances whatsoever in which the death penalty is fair justice, even for somebody who cannot be rehabilitated, is an absolute monster, and the most unspeakable.
It's not about fair justice. That's not the issue. The issue is twofold. One, what is the moral rights and wrongs of knowingly taking a life? For me, that's wrong, unless it's in self-defence, unless it's a necessity.
And that's the key point of difference, isn't it?
And take life without thinking about what the consequences are.
Michelle, that's the key point of difference, isn't it? I get it, and that's the crucial aspect of this, because some people would say that there are some crimes for which they themselves morally can justify saying, look, I'd execute this person. Other people would say, no, it's a hard and fast.
But is that what our justice system comes down to, morality?
Miscarriages of justice in murder cases have been going on for centuries, and there's no such thing as 100% nailed-on case, as you suggest. There is no such
Chris,
thing.
I'm going to have to park it there for you, Chris. I did give the first word to you, so Michelle, I'll just let you close and then we'll wrap it up. Go on.
Well, look, I'll put it bluntly. If someone tortured my child and it was proved beyond any form of doubt, then I would be absolutely perfectly comfortable with that person having their life taken away from them as well. Okay.